Sarah watched with trembling hands as the skeletal horse stumbled into the auction pen, its once beautiful coat now dull and patchy, hanging loose over protruding bones. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. While others turned away in dismay, her young heart saw past the creature's broken exterior to the fighting spirit that still flickered in its gentle brown eyes. To the seasoned ranchers and dealers, it was just another failed investment. But to a determined 9-year-old girl with a jar full of birthday money and an unwavering dream, it was destiny calling, a chance to prove that sometimes the greatest miracles come in the most unexpected packages. Welcome to Animal Stories Untold, where every week we bring you extraordinary tales of hope, healing, and the remarkable bonds between humans and animals. These aren't just stories, they're testimonies to the power of compassion and the incredible impact one caring heart can have on a life that others have given up on. If you believe in second chances and the magic that happens when love meets determination, you won't want to miss this incredible journey. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles do happen, and subscribe to join our growing family of animal lovers. Now let's dive into a story that will make you believe in the power of a child's love to change the world, one beating heart at a time. The early morning sun had barely peeked over the rolling hills of Montana's Paradise Valley when Sarah Matthews woke up, her heart racing with anticipation. This wasn't just any Saturday in early June. It was the day she'd been preparing for since she first overheard Mr. Peterson, their elderly neighbor, talking about the upcoming livestock auction at the Twin Rivers County Fairgrounds. For months she'd been saving every penny from her allowance, birthday money, and even the dollars she'd earned helping Mrs. Johnson down the road with her garden. The jar hidden under her bed now contained exactly $217.43, her entire life savings. Sarah pulled on her favorite pair of worn jeans, a faded blue t-shirt with a horse galloping across the front, and the small cowboy boots she'd inherited from her older sister Emma. Her blonde hair was quickly braided into 2 neat plaits, just the way her mother had taught her before she passed away 2 years ago. The thought of her mom brought both a familiar ache and a surge of determination. She could almost hear her mother's voice saying, "Sometimes, sweetheart, the biggest dreams come in the smallest packages." The kitchen was quiet when Sarah tiptoed downstairs, careful not to wake her father, who had worked a late shift at the local veterinary clinic where he was the maintenance manager. She scribbled a quick note. "Gone to the auction with Emma, don't worry, Dad, love you." Her 16-year-old sister had reluctantly agreed to drive her after weeks of persistent begging and the promise of doing her chores for a month. Emma might have thought Sarah's dream of buying a horse was just another childish fantasy, but she couldn't resist her little sister's unwavering determination. The drive to the fairgrounds was filled with Sarah's excited chatter about everything she knew about horses, which was considerable for a 9-year-old. She'd spent countless hours in the local library, reading every book about horse care she could find. Her bedroom walls were covered with carefully cut-out magazine pictures of horses, and her school notebooks were filled with doodles of the stable she planned to build someday. Emma listened with half-amused patience, occasionally glancing at her sister's animated reflection in the rear-view mirror of their father's old pickup truck. "You know Dad's going to flip when he finds out what you're really planning," Emma said, as they pulled into the dusty parking lot of the Twin Rivers County Fairgrounds. The morning air was crisp, carrying the mixed scents of hay, livestock, and the promise of summer. "And where exactly do you plan to keep a horse, even if you manage to buy one?" Sarah patted the worn backpack that contained her precious jar of savings. "Mr. Peterson said we could use his old corral, the one behind the red barn. He hasn't had horses since Mrs. Peterson got sick last year, and he said it's just sitting there empty." Her voice took on the serious tone she used when she was trying to sound grown up. "I've got it all figured out, Emma. I've been studying about horse care, and I know exactly what they need." The fairgrounds were already bustling with activity despite the early hour. Trucks and trailers filled the parking area, and the air was alive with the sounds of livestock and the murmur of voices discussing bloodlines and market prices. Sarah clutched her backpack tighter as they made their way through the crowd, her eyes wide as she took in the organized chaos of a country auction. Inside the main building, the auction was already underway. The auctioneer's rapid-fire voice echoed through the space, punctuated by the sharp crack of his gavel and the occasional whinny or moo from the holding pens. Sarah and Emma found seats near the back, where Sarah could stand on the wooden bench to see over the heads of the adults in front of them. For the next hour, Sarah watched intently as various animals were led through the auction ring. She observed how the bidding worked, her fingers nervously playing with the zipper of her backpack as she practiced raising her hand the way she'd seen others do. Emma sat beside her, alternating between checking her phone and shooting worried glances at her sister. Then everything changed. A hush fell over the crowd as the next horse was led into the ring, or rather, stumbled in. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The horse was a mare, she could tell, though it was hard to see any beauty in the creature's current state. Its coat, which might once have been a rich chestnut, was dull and patchy, ribs pressed against skin, like bars of a cage, and its head hung low, as if the effort of standing was almost too much to bear. The auctioneer's voice faltered slightly before he began his spiel, but his words were drowned out by the murmurs rippling through the crowd. "Waste of time," someone muttered nearby. "Not worth the bullet it'd take to put it down," another voice added cruelly. Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes, but not from sadness, from anger. How dare they talk about any living creature that way? "Starting bid at $50, the auctioneer announced, his voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. "Do I hear 50? $dollars for this. This mare." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heart pounding in her ears as she looked at the horse again. Despite its terrible condition, there was something about the way it held itself, a dignity that hadn't quite been beaten out of it. When the mare lifted its head for a moment, Sarah caught a glimpse of its eyes, deep, soulful eyes that seemed to hold both infinite sadness and a flicker of hope. "Anyone? $40? The auctioneer's voice grew desperate. "30? Sarah's hand shot up before Emma could stop her. $200! Her clear child's voice rang out through the sudden silence. Every head in the auction house turned toward her. Emma grabbed her arm, trying to pull it down, but Sarah stood firm, her chin lifted in determination. The auctioneer blinked in surprise, peering over his glasses at the small figure standing on the bench. "Little lady, do you understand how this works? This is a binding bid." "I have $217.43, Sarah interrupted, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "And I want to buy this horse." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, but they died quickly as Sarah continued to stand, her hand raised high, her eyes fixed on the mare in the ring. The auctioneer looked around the room, waiting for another bid, but no one moved. Who would bid against a child for a horse that was probably destined for the knacker's yard anyway? "Going once," the auctioneer called, his voice uncertain. "Going twice." Emma was tugging at Sarah's sleeve, whispering urgently about how their father was going to kill them both, but Sarah barely heard her. All she could see was the mare, who had lifted its head again and seemed to be looking right at her with those deep, knowing eyes. "Sold!" The crack of the gavel made Sarah jump. "To the young lady in the back for $200. The reality of what she'd done hit Sarah like a wave. She had just bought a horse, a real, living, breathing horse. Her hands shook as she carefully counted out the money from her jar, leaving $17.43 that she knew she'd need for feed and supplies. The auction house manager looked uncertain as he accepted the crumpled bills and coins, but Sarah held herself tall, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. As she approached the holding pen where her new horse waited, Sarah could hear the whispers following her. Some were amused, some concerned, and some downright critical. But she focused only on the mare, who watched her approach with what seemed like wary interest. "What's her name?" Sarah asked the handler, who stood nearby looking uncomfortable. "Don't have one," he grunted. "Was brought in last week. No papers, no history. Previous owner didn't even stick around long enough to fill out the proper forms." Sarah stepped closer to the pen, speaking softly as she'd read you should do with nervous horses. "Then I'll call you Hope," she whispered, "because that's what I see in your eyes, even if nobody else does." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The mare's ear twitched at the sound of her voice, and for a brief moment she lifted her head higher, revealing a hint of the proud creature she must once have been. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of determination. She didn't know how, but she was going to help this horse become that proud creature again. Emma had finally caught up with her, phone pressed to her ear as she tried desperately to reach their father. "Sarah, this is crazy. Where are we even going to put it? How are we going to get it home? Dad's going to—" "Her," Sarah corrected firmly. "Not it. Her name is Hope, and Mr. Peterson already said we could use his corral, remember? And his truck has a horse trailer. He said we could borrow it if we needed to." She turned to her sister with pleading eyes. "Please, Emma, help me with this. I promise I'll do all the work. I've been studying everything about horses. I know what they need, what they eat, how to care for them when they're sick. Please." Emma looked from her sister's determined face to the dejected mare and back again. Finally she sighed, running a hand through her hair in a gesture that reminded Sarah painfully of their mother. "I'll call Mr. Peterson," she said at last. "But you're the one who's going to explain this to Dad." The next hour was a blur of activity. Mr. Peterson arrived with his old truck and horse trailer, his weathered face creased with concern as he looked over Sarah's purchase. But he didn't say anything discouraging, just helped them carefully load Hope into the trailer. The mare was weak and stumbled several times, but Sarah walked beside her, speaking softly and encouragingly until she was safely inside. As they drove slowly home, Sarah sat in the back seat of Mr. Peterson's truck, twisted around so she could watch the trailer through the rear window. Her mind was racing with plans and worries and hopes, all tumbling together like leaves in an autumn wind. She knew the real challenge was just beginning, not just nursing Hope back to health, but convincing her father to let her keep her. The sun was high in the sky by the time they pulled up to Mr. Peterson's property. Sarah's father's truck was in their driveway next door, and she could see him walking rapidly toward them, his face a storm cloud of concern and anger. But as she slipped out of the truck and hurried to the trailer where Hope waited, Sarah felt a calm certainty settle over her. Whatever came next, she had done the right thing. Sometimes, love means taking a chance, even when everyone else thinks you're crazy. As she helped guide Hope down the trailer ramp, supporting the weak horse with all her strength, Sarah remembered something else her mother used to say. The biggest hearts often come in the smallest packages and the greatest love. Stories don't always start with once upon a time. Looking into Hope's tired but trusting eyes, Sarah knew this was going to be one of those love stories. She just had to convince everyone else to believe in it too. Their audience had grown. Several neighbors had gathered, drawn by the unusual sight of Mr. Peterson's horse trailer and the commotion. Sarah could hear them whispering, their voices a mix of concern and criticism. But she focused only on Hope, guiding her carefully toward the corral that would be her new home. Each step was a victory, each breath a promise of better days to come. The mare's hooves barely cleared the ground as she shuffled forward, her movements speaking of exhaustion and pain. Yet there was something in the way she followed Sarah's gentle guidance, something in the trust already beginning to form, that made Sarah's heart swell with hope. This wasn't just about saving a horse anymore. It was about proving that sometimes the most unlikely pairs could create the most beautiful stories. As Hope finally stepped into the corral, Sarah knew their journey was just beginning. She had no idea of the challenges that lay ahead, the obstacles they would face, or the miraculous transformation that would unfold. But standing there in the warm Montana sun, her small hand resting on Hope's bony shoulder, Sarah made a silent promise to the mare and to herself. This was going to be a story of second chances, of unwavering love, and of the extraordinary things that can happen when one small girl refuses to give up on a dream that everyone else thinks is impossible. Sarah's father's reaction was exactly what she had expected, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and overwhelming concern that made his face cycle through various shades of red as he paced in front of Mr. Peterson's corral. Hope stood quietly in the corner, her head lowered, while Sarah stood her ground between her father and the fence, her small hands gripping the wooden rails as if they could give her strength. A horse? David Matthews ran his hands through his graying hair for what seemed like the 100th time. Sarah, honey, we can't keep a horse. We can barely afford the house payment since... He stopped himself, but Sarah knew he was thinking about the medical bills from her mother's illness. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken grief and worry. Dad. Sarah's voice was steady, surprising even herself. I bought her with my own money. Mr. Peterson said we can use his corral and barn for free. I've been reading everything I can about horses, and I know what they need. Please just look at her, really look at her. David Matthews paused in his pacing to truly look at the mare for the first time. His expression softened slightly as his veterinary clinic experience kicked in, professional concern replacing parental panic. She's in terrible condition, he murmured, more to himself than to Sarah. Severely malnourished, possible parasites. Coat indicates serious neglect. That's why she needs us, Dad. Sarah pressed her advantage. You always tell me that Mom taught us to help those who can't help themselves. Remember when she brought home that three-legged cat that everyone said wouldn't survive, and Tripod lived for 12 more years? Emma, who had been watching from a safe distance, stepped forward. Dad, I know it sounds crazy, but Sarah's really done her research. She's been studying horse care books for months, and she hesitated, then continued, Mom would have loved this. You know she would. The mention of their mother seemed to deflate David's anger. He looked at Hope again, this time with the veterinarian's trained eye. She's going to need a lot of professional care, special feed, medications, probably some serious veterinary work. I have $17.43 left, Sarah offered quickly, and I can earn more. Mrs. Johnson said she needs help with her garden all summer, and Mr. Peterson mentioned he could use help organizing his tool shed. I'll work really hard, Dad. I promise. Mr. Peterson, who had been quietly observing the family discussion, cleared his throat. David, he said, his voice gravelly with age but firm with conviction, I've watched your girl there reading horse care books in my wife's garden all spring. Never seen a child so determined. Martha would have. He paused, thinking of his late wife. Well, she would have said some things are meant to be. The corral's just sitting empty, and that old barn's got plenty of good hay storage. Seems a shame to waste it. David Matthews looked from Mr. Peterson to his daughters, then back to Hope. The mare had lifted her head slightly, her eyes seeming to meet his with a quiet dignity that belied her poor condition. Finally he sighed, a sound of resignation tinged with the faintest hint of amusement. 2 weeks, he said firmly. We'll give it 2 weeks. If it's too much, if the horse's condition is too severe, or if you can't handle the responsibility. He didn't get to finish because Sarah had launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. Thank you. Thank you, she exclaimed, her voice muffled against his shirt. You won't regret it, Dad. I promise. We'll need to have Dr. Anderson come look at her, David continued, trying to maintain his stern demeanor despite the smile tugging at his lips. And you'll need to learn about proper feeding schedules, mucking out stalls, basic health care. I already know about that, Sarah bounced with excitement. You have to start slow with feeding when a horse is malnourished. Small amounts, several times a day, gradually increasing. And they need fresh water all the time, and regular grooming helps check for health problems and... David held up his hands in surrender. Okay. I can see you've done your homework. But this is still a huge responsibility, Sarah. A horse isn't like a hamster or even a dog. They need constant care every single day, no matter the weather or how tired you are. I know, Dad. Sarah's voice grew serious. And I'm ready. Hope needs me, and I won't let her down. The rest of the day was a flurry of activity. Mr. Peterson helped them clean out the small barn attached to the corral, while Emma drove to the feed store with a list of supplies Sarah had apparently been compiling for weeks. David called Dr. Anderson, who agreed to come first thing in the morning to examine Hope. Sarah stayed close to Hope throughout the preparations, talking to her softly and offering small amounts of water. The mare seemed to draw strength from the girl's presence, lifting her head a little higher each time Sarah approached. By late afternoon, she had even taken a few tentative steps to follow Sarah across the corral, though the effort clearly exhausted her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the Montana landscape, Sarah sat on an overturned bucket near the corral fence, watching Hope nibble at the small portion of hay they'd provided. Her father approached quietly, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in his hands. "Here," he said, offering her one of the mugs. "Your mother used to say hot chocolate makes everything feel more manageable." Sarah accepted the mug gratefully, scooting over to make room for her father on the wide fence rail. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching hope in the gathering dusk. "You know," David finally said, his voice thoughtful, "your mother would have done exactly the same thing at your age. She always had a way of seeing the potential in things others had given up on." Sarah leaned against her father's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his work shirt, mixed with the sweet aroma of hot chocolate. "Do you think she would have been proud of me?" "Oh, sweetheart," David wrapped an arm around her shoulders, "she would have been over the moon. But she also would have reminded you that the hard part is just beginning. Saving Hope was the first step. Helping her heal and thrive is going to be a much longer journey." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad, but we'll do it together, right? Like how you and Mom always worked together to help the animals at the clinic?" David squeezed her shoulder, his throat tight with emotion. "Together," he agreed softly. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with a hint of dew sparkling on the grass. Sarah was up before sunrise, dressed and ready to begin Hope's care routine. She had spent half the night carefully writing out a schedule in her notebook, complete with feeding times, exercise periods, and grooming sessions. Dr. Anderson arrived just as Sarah was measuring out Hope's morning feed portion. The veterinarian was a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She had known Sarah since she was a baby and had been a close friend of her mother's. "Well, well," Dr. Anderson said, surveying the scene before her. "I hear you've become a horse owner, Miss Sarah. Shall we take a look at your new friend?" The examination was thorough and at times difficult to watch. Hope was patient throughout, though she trembled when Dr. Anderson had to check her more sensitive areas. Sarah stayed by the mare's head, stroking her neck and murmuring encouragement. "She's in rough shape," Dr. Anderson finally announced, straightening up from her examination. "Severe malnutrition, of course, and she's got a heavy parasite load that we'll need to address. There's some muscle atrophy from lack of exercise, and her hooves need serious attention. But—" she paused, giving Sarah a warm smile. "There's nothing here that proper care and time won't heal." Sarah's face lit up with relief and joy. "Really? She's going to be okay?" "With a lot of work and patience, yes," Dr. Anderson nodded. "I'll write up a treatment plan and feeding schedule. We'll need to start her on a deworming program right away, and I'll have my farrier come out to look at those hooves. The good news is, she's younger than she looks, probably only about 7 or 8 years old. Once we get some weight back on her and deal with these health issues, she could have many good years ahead of her." As Dr. Anderson wrote out prescriptions and instructions, she continued talking. "The biggest challenge will be building her strength back gradually. You can't rush recovery with horses. Too much food too quickly can cause serious problems, and exercise needs to be introduced very slowly. But I have a feeling you're up to the challenge, aren't you, Sarah?" Sarah nodded vigorously. "I've been reading about rehabilitating malnourished horses. They need small meals throughout the day, and you have to increase the amounts very slowly. And lots of fresh water and gentle grooming to help their circulation and—" Dr. Anderson laughed, holding up her hands. "I can see you've done your homework. Tell you what, why don't I show you how to do a proper health check? That way you can monitor Hope's progress and let me know if anything concerns you." For the next hour, Dr. Anderson taught Sarah how to check Hope's vital signs, examine her gums for signs of health issues, and look for other important indicators of wellness. Sarah absorbed every detail, carefully noting everything in her notebook. "One more thing," Dr. Anderson said as she packed up her supplies. "She's going to need a lot of emotional rehabilitation too. Horses who have been through neglect often have trust issues, but—" She smiled at the way Hope was already following Sarah's movements with her eyes. "I think you've already got a good start on that part." After Dr. Anderson left, Sarah's father reviewed the treatment plan and prescriptions. "This isn't going to be cheap," he warned, but his tone was gentle. "Are you sure you're ready for this commitment?" Sarah squared her shoulders, looking every bit like her mother in that moment. "I'll find a way to earn the money, Dad. I promise. And—" She hesitated, then continued, "Maybe I could help out more at the clinic. After school and on weekends, I could clean cages or help with filing, and maybe use what I earn for Hope's care." David Matthews studied his daughter's earnest face, seeing in it the same determination that had made him fall in love with her mother all those years ago. "I think we can work something out," he said finally. "But school comes first, and you'll need to keep up with your regular chores too." "I will," Sarah beamed. "And I'll show you every day that you made the right choice letting me keep her." The next few days fell into a routine. Sarah was up at dawn each morning to give Hope her first small meal of the day. Between school and her other responsibilities, she managed to divide Hope's daily feed into 6 small portions, just as Dr. Anderson had recommended. Each feeding was an opportunity for bonding, as Sarah would talk softly to Hope while she ate, telling her about school, about her mother, about her dreams for their future together. Emma, despite her initial skepticism, found herself drawn into her sister's project. She started spending her free periods in the school library, researching horse rehabilitation techniques and printing out articles she thought might be helpful. Even their father, busy as he was with work at the clinic, made time each evening to check on Hope's progress and offer suggestions based on his veterinary experience. The local community's reaction was mixed. Some, like Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Johnson, were supportive and encouraging. Others were more skeptical, whispering that it was foolish to waste time and money on such a hopeless case. But Sarah paid little attention to the doubters. She was too busy focusing on each small victory. The first time Hope walked all the way across the corral without stumbling, the morning she nickered softly in greeting when Sarah arrived with breakfast, the day she held her head high enough to look over the corral fence. A week into their journey, Sarah sat cross-legged in the corral, carefully documenting Hope's progress in her notebook. The mare stood nearby, dozing in the warm afternoon sun. Her ribs were still visible, but her coat had already begun to improve with regular grooming and proper nutrition. More importantly, there was a new alertness in her eyes, a growing interest in the world around her. "You're doing an amazing job with her," a voice said, making Sarah look up. It was Ms. Rodriguez, her science teacher, standing at the corral fence. "I've been watching your progress when I drive by on my way to school." Sarah scrambled to her feet, brushing hay from her jeans. "Thank you. She's getting stronger every day. Dr. Anderson says her blood work is already showing improvement." Ms. Rodriguez smiled. "You know, we're starting our life sciences unit next week. How would you feel about doing a presentation for the class about Hope's rehabilitation? It would be a wonderful real-world example of how proper care and nutrition can affect an animal's health." Sarah's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "Really? Could I bring pictures and show everyone her progress?" "Absolutely," Ms. Rodriguez nodded. "In fact, if you document everything carefully, her diet, exercise, medical treatment, and the changes you observe, it could make an excellent science fair project. The idea of sharing Hope's story with others excited Sarah. That evening, she spent hours organizing her notes and photographs, creating a timeline of Hope's progress. Emma helped her set up a proper documentation system on their shared laptop, teaching her how to create spreadsheets to track Hope's weight gain and vital signs. As Sarah worked on her presentation, she realized something important. Hope's story wasn't just about saving one horse. It was about showing others that with enough love, patience, and determination, amazing transformations were possible. Maybe, just maybe, their journey together could inspire others to take a chance on animals that everyone else had given up on. The following Sunday afternoon, Sarah was surprised to see several cars pulling up to Mr. Peterson's property. Dr. Anderson emerged from one, followed by her farrier, Tom. From another car came Mrs. Johnson and her granddaughter Katie, who was in Sarah's class at school. Mr. Peterson walked over from his house carrying a box of old horse care books that had belonged to his wife. "What's everyone doing here?" Sarah asked her father, who was trying unsuccessfully to hide a smile. "Well," David Matthews said, "word has gotten around about what you're doing with Hope. Dr. Anderson mentioned that she could use some help with the more intensive rehabilitation work, and these folks volunteered their time. Sometimes, sweetheart, when you believe in something strongly enough, other people start believing too." For the rest of the afternoon, the impromptu volunteer group worked together to help with Hope's care. Tom the farrier gave Sarah a detailed lesson on hoof care, showing her how to recognize potential problems early. Mrs. Johnson, who had worked with horses in her younger years, demonstrated proper grooming techniques that would help stimulate Hope's circulation and promote coat health. Even Katie, who had never been around horses before, pitched in to help clean the barn and organize supplies. As Sarah watched her community come together to support her and Hope, she felt a warmth in her heart that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. This was what her mother had always talked about, how acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. That evening, as Sarah prepared Hope's last meal of the day, she noticed something different about the mare. Hope was standing taller, her ears pricked forward with interest as she watched the world around her. When Sarah approached with the feed bucket, Hope took a step toward her, not just following, but actively seeking connection. Sarah set down the bucket and held out her hand, barely breathing as Hope stretched out her neck and gently nuzzled her palm. It was the first time the mare had initiated contact, and Sarah felt tears of joy welling up in her eyes. "See?" she whispered to Hope. "I told you we could do this together, and we're just getting started." As weeks turned into months, the transformation in Hope became more apparent with each passing day. Her ribs, once sharp enough to cast shadows, began to smooth under a gradually filling coat. The dull, patchy fur started to shed, revealing glimpses of the rich chestnut color underneath. But it wasn't just Hope's physical appearance that was changing. There was a new light in her eyes, a growing confidence in her movements that made Sarah's heart soar every time she watched her horse move around the corral. Sarah's presentation to her science class had been a huge success. Her classmates, many of whom had initially teased her about buying a broken-down nag, sat in rapt attention as she showed them the before and after photos, explaining the careful process of rehabilitation. Ms. Rodriguez had been so impressed that she'd encouraged Sarah to expand her documentation into a proper scientific study for the upcoming district science fair. One crisp September morning, as Sarah arrived for Hope's breakfast feeding, she found Dr. Anderson already at the corral, watching the mare with a thoughtful expression. "Good morning, Dr. Anderson," Sarah called out, hurrying over with her feed. "Bucket, is everything okay?" The veterinarian turned to her with a warm smile. "Everything is more than okay, Sarah. I was just admiring your work. Do you realize it's been 3 months since you brought Hope home? The progress she's made is remarkable." Sarah beamed with pride as she measured out Hope's morning portion. The mare had graduated from the initial critical care feed to a balanced rehabilitation diet, and her portions had gradually increased as her health improved. "She's getting stronger every day," Sarah said, watching as Hope walked over to greet them, her movements fluid and natural. "Yesterday she even did a little trot around the corral." Dr. Anderson nodded approvingly. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I think it's time we started considering some light exercise work. Nothing strenuous yet, but some structured walking and gentle groundwork could help build her muscle tone." Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? You think she's ready? With proper guidance, yes. In fact," Dr. Anderson reached into her truck and pulled out a worn leather halter. "I brought you something. This belonged to my first horse, and I think Hope has earned it." Sarah accepted the halter reverently, running her fingers over the smooth, well-cared-for leather. "Thank you so much, but I've never done groundwork before. I mean, I've read about it, but that's why I'm here," Dr. Anderson smiled. "If you're interested, I thought we could start some basic training sessions, twice a week after school. We'll take it slow, focus on building trust and communication." "Yes, please," Sarah exclaimed, then quickly lowered her voice when Hope startled slightly at her outburst. "Sorry, girl," she added softly to the mare. "I'm just excited about our new adventure." The training sessions with Dr. Anderson became the highlight of Sarah's week. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she would rush home from school, change into her work clothes, and head to the corral where Dr. Anderson waited patiently to share her knowledge. They started with the basics, teaching Hope to respond, to gentle pressure on the halter, to move forward, stop, and turn on command. The mare proved to be an intelligent student, though she still had moments of anxiety when faced with new situations. Sarah learned to read Hope's body language, to recognize the subtle signs that indicated stress or confusion. "The key," Dr. Anderson explained during one session, "is to build trust through consistency. Hope needs to know that you'll never ask more of her than she can give, but that you'll always believe in her ability to learn and grow." Sarah took these lessons to heart, applying them not just to her work with Hope, but to other aspects of her life as well. Her teachers noticed a new maturity in her approach to schoolwork, a willingness to tackle challenging problems with the same patience she showed in Hope's training. The science fair project was coming along nicely too. Emma had helped her create detailed charts tracking Hope's weight gain, vital signs, and behavioral changes. Sarah's father contributed his veterinary expertise, helping her understand the medical aspects of Hope's recovery and teaching her how to present the information in a scientific way. One Saturday morning, as Sarah was demonstrating Hope's new skills to her father, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the corral. A woman in an expensive riding outfit stepped out, followed by a man in a business suit. They stood watching Sarah work, with Hope for several minutes before approaching the fence. "Remarkable," the woman said, her voice carrying a hint of surprise. "When I heard about this project, I was skeptical, but the transformation is impressive." Sarah's father walked over to greet the newcomers, while Sarah continued working with Hope, though she kept one ear turned toward their conversation. "I'm Victoria Blackwood," The woman introduced herself. "And this is my associate, Mr. Reynolds. We're from the Mountain View Equestrian Center." She handed David Matthews a business card. "We've heard quite a bit about your daughter's work with this horse." Mountain View was the most prestigious riding facility in the state, Sarah knew. She'd seen pictures of their immaculate stables and championship horses in magazines. "We're always looking for inspiring stories for our youth riding program," Victoria continued, "and we believe your daughter's project could be exactly what we need. We'd like to feature her and Hope in our upcoming newsletter, perhaps even have them give a presentation at our youth riding clinic next month." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. A chance to share Hope's story at Mountain View. It seemed too good to be true. "Of course," Mr. Reynolds added, his voice smoothly professional. "We'd need to ensure the horse is suitable for such an environment. Our facility maintains certain standards. We would want to have our own veterinarian examine her, and there would need to be some professional training to prepare for the presentation." Something in his tone made Sarah uncomfortable. She led Hope closer to where the adults were talking, noticing how the mare's ears flattened slightly at the stranger's presence. "That's very kind of you," David Matthews said carefully, "but Hope's rehabilitation is still in progress. We're working closely with Dr. Anderson, and she's developed a careful training schedule that—" "Oh, we're well aware," Victoria interrupted. "In fact, we'd like to offer to take over Hope's care completely. Our facility has state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment, professional trainers, everything she would need to reach her full potential. We would, of course, compensate you generously." Sarah's hand tightened on Hope's lead rope. "You want to buy her?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Victoria turned to her with a practiced smile. "Think of it as an opportunity, dear. Hope would have the best care money can buy, and you would be properly rewarded for all your hard work. Plus, you could visit her at Mountain View any time you like." "No!" The word came out firmly, surprising even Sarah herself. "Hope's not for sale." "Young lady," Mr. Reynolds began, his tone condescending, "this is a very generous offer. The money could help your family, and the horse would—" "Her name is Hope," Sarah interrupted, "not the horse. And she's not going anywhere. She's family now." Victoria's smile tightened slightly. "Perhaps we should discuss this with your father privately. These decisions shouldn't be left to children." But David Matthews was already shaking his head. "My daughter made her position clear, and I support her decision. Hope stays here." After the visitors left, Sarah stood with her arms around Hope's neck, breathing in the familiar sweet scent of hay and horse. "I'd never sell you," she whispered. "Not for all the money in the world." Her father came to stand beside them, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "your mother would have done exactly the same thing. She always said that some things are worth more than money." The incident with Victoria Blackwood had an unexpected effect on the local community. Word spread quickly about how the little girl who'd bought the unwanted auction horse had turned down a substantial offer from Mountain View. Instead of criticism, Sarah found herself receiving more support than ever. Mrs. Johnson's granddaughter Katie started coming by regularly after school, eager to learn about horse care alongside Sarah. Mr. Peterson, inspired by the progress he saw in Hope, began fixing up his old riding arena, talking about maybe getting another horse himself, now that there's such good company next door. Even some of the initial skeptics changed their tune. Old Mr. Griffin, who had been one of the loudest critics at the auction, stopped by one afternoon to watch Sarah work with Hope. "I was wrong about you two," he admitted gruffly. Never seen a horse come back like that, or a young person with such dedication. The training sessions with Dr. Anderson continued to show progress. Hope had mastered basic groundwork and was now learning more complex movements. She could walk, trot, and turn on command, always staying tuned to Sarah's signals. The trust between them had grown into something beautiful to watch. "I think," Dr. Anderson said one afternoon in late October, "it's time to start thinking about saddle training." Sarah's heart leaped at the words she'd been hoping to hear, but anxiety quickly followed. "Are you sure she's ready? I don't want to rush her." Dr. Anderson smiled approvingly at Sarah's caution. "That's exactly why I know you're both ready. You've learned to put Hope's needs first, to read her signals, and to build trust gradually. These are the foundations of good horsemanship." They started slowly, just as they had with everything else. First came getting Hope comfortable with a saddle pad, then with the weight and feel of a light training saddle. Sarah spent hours just leading Hope around with the saddle on, letting her adjust to the new sensation. The first time Sarah put her foot in the stirrup, she felt like her heart might burst with excitement and nervousness. She didn't mount fully, just stood there, letting Hope feel a little of her weight, talking to her softly the whole time. "That's my girl," she whispered, as Hope stood steady, turning her head to watch Sarah with trusting eyes. "We're in this, together, just like always." Progress continued in small steps. Each day, Sarah would put a little more weight in the stirrup, lean a little further over Hope's back, always watching for any signs of discomfort or anxiety. Dr. Anderson supervised, every session offering guidance and encouragement. One crisp November morning, as frost sparkled on the grass and Hope's breath came out in visible puffs, Dr. Anderson announced it was time. Sarah had just finished Hope's morning grooming, and the mare was wearing her saddle, looking relaxed and alert. "Remember," Dr. Anderson instructed, "mount smoothly but don't rush. Keep talking to her. Trust the bond you've built." Sarah took a deep breath, put her foot in the stirrup, and slowly, carefully swung her leg over Hope's back. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Hope turned her head, nickering softly, and Sarah felt tears of joy running down her cheeks. "You did it, girl," she whispered, leaning forward to pat Hope's neck. "We did it together." That evening, as Sarah sat doing her homework at the kitchen table, she found herself thinking about how far they'd come. The scared, skeletal horse from the auction was now a strong, confident mare who trusted her enough to carry her on her back. But the transformation wasn't just in Hope. Sarah had changed too. She'd learned about patience, dedication, and the power of believing in someone, even when nobody else did. She'd discovered strength she didn't know she had, and a capacity for love that seemed to grow bigger every day. Emma came into the kitchen, dropping into the chair across from her. "Sister, you know," she said thoughtfully, "Mom would be really proud of you. Not just for saving Hope, but for the person you've become while doing it." Sarah smiled, thinking of her mother's favorite saying about the biggest hearts coming in the smallest packages. "I think," she said slowly, "Mom knew all along that sometimes the things that seem impossible are the ones most worth doing." As if in response to her words, a soft whinny floated in through the kitchen window. Sarah looked out to see Hope standing at the corral fence, her head held high, her coat glowing in the setting sun. The mare's eyes met hers, and in that moment, Sarah knew that their journey together was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more skills to master, more trust to build, but they would face it all together. The girl who believed in second chances and the horse who had learned to believe in herself again. Their story was becoming something more than just a tale of rehabilitation. It was a testament to the transformative power of love, patience, and unwavering faith. That night, as Sarah finished recording the day's events in her project journal, she added a special note. Today, Hope and I didn't just take a step forward in our training. We proved that sometimes the greatest victories come from simply refusing to give up on someone, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. Winter descended on Paradise Valley with a fierce determination, bringing with it new challenges for Sarah and Hope. The pristine Montana snow blanketed the countryside, transforming Mr. Peterson's corral into a winter wonderland. But beneath the picturesque scene lay countless obstacles that tested both girl and horse in ways they hadn't expected. The first major challenge came in the form of the bitter cold. Sarah had read extensively about winter horse care, but reading about something and experiencing it firsthand were two very different things. Every morning she would bundle up in layers of warm clothing, trudging through knee-deep snow before sunrise to break the ice in Hope's water trough and deliver her morning feed. "You're sure you don't want me to do that for you?" her father would ask, watching her pull on her heavy boots in the pre-dawn darkness. But Sarah would just shake her head, determined to maintain the routine she and Hope had established. "She's in counting on me, Dad. Besides, I promised I'd take care of her no matter what." The cold mornings were made bearable by Hope's eager greetings. The mare would now trot to the fence when she heard Sarah's approaching footsteps, nickering softly in welcome. Her winter coat had grown in thick and healthy, the rich chestnut color deepening to a warm chocolate in the dense fur. Dr. Anderson's training sessions continued despite the weather, though they had to modify their approach. The veterinarian taught Sarah about the importance of proper warm-up exercises in cold weather and how to recognize signs that Hope might be uncomfortable in the freezing temperatures. "The key is to keep her moving," Dr. Anderson explained one frosty afternoon, watching as Sarah led Hope through their daily exercises. "But we have to be careful not to overdo it. Frozen ground can be hard on their joints, and cold muscles are more prone to injury." Sarah took these warnings seriously, developing a careful winter exercise routine that kept Hope active without risking her health. They would start with slow walks around the corral, gradually building up to more active movements as Hope's muscles warmed up. Sarah had even started incorporating some of the groundwork patterns Dr. Anderson had taught them, creating paths through the snow that looked like abstract art from above. One particularly cold morning in December, Sarah arrived at the corral to find Hope pawing anxiously at the ground, her breakfast largely untouched. Immediately, alarm bells went off in Sarah's mind. Hope hadn't missed a meal since those first difficult days after the auction. "What's wrong, girl?" Sarah asked softly, approaching her horse with careful steps. Hope's ears were pinned back slightly, and she kept turning to look at her belly. Sarah's heart started racing as she remembered reading about colic, one of the most dangerous conditions horses could develop. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and called Dr. Anderson's emergency number. As she waited for a response, she remembered what she'd learned about potential colic symptoms. She needed to keep Hope from rolling if this was indeed colic, as that could cause a twisted intestine. "Come on, girl," Sarah said firmly, clipping a lead rope to Hope's halter. "We need to keep moving until Dr. Anderson gets here." For the next 45 minutes, Sarah walked Hope in slow circles, talking to her continuously, watching for any changes in her condition. The mare followed willingly, though she was clearly uncomfortable. When Dr. Anderson's truck finally pulled up to the corral, Sarah felt tears of relief freezing on her cheeks. The veterinarian worked quickly and efficiently, examining Hope while Sarah held her steady. "Good catch," Dr. Anderson said finally, straightening up from her examination. "It's a mild case of colic, likely brought on by the cold weather affecting her water consumption. You did exactly the right thing by keeping her moving and calling me immediately." Sarah helped administer the treatment Dr. Anderson prescribed, carefully following her instructions for the next 24 hours of care. It meant missing school that day, but her father understood the importance of monitoring Hope's condition closely. "Sometimes," he said, bringing Sarah a thermos of hot chocolate as she kept her vigil, "being responsible means making hard choices. You're learning that earlier than most." By evening, Hope was showing significant improvement, her appetite returning and her discomfort visibly lessening. Sarah stayed with her until well after dark, only going inside when her father insisted. She needed rest herself. The colic scare had taught Sarah valuable lessons about winter horse care. She became even more vigilant about ensuring Hope's water didn't freeze, even convincing her father to help her install a heated water trough. She also started adding warm water to Hope's feed and providing extra hay during particularly cold nights, understanding that digestion helped horses stay warm. As Christmas approached, the valley was hit with a severe winter storm. Sarah spent hours reinforcing Hope's shelter, working alongside Mr. Peterson to ensure the barn was properly sealed against the bitter wind. The old rancher had become one of Hope's most devoted supporters, often sharing stories about his years of horse experience while helping Sarah with barn maintenance. "A horse like Hope," he said one afternoon as they worked to weatherproof the barn doors, "comes along once in a lifetime. She's what we call a heart horse, one that connects with your soul in a way that changes you forever." Sarah understood exactly what he meant. Her bond with Hope had grown into something far deeper than she could have imagined that day at the auction. They communicated now with subtle cues and unspoken understanding, each aware of the other's moods and needs. This connection was put to the test during the height of the storm. The wind howled through the valley like a living thing, driving snow and ice against the barn walls with frightening force. Sarah insisted on sleeping in the barn that night, worried about Hope's safety in the extreme weather. Her father, after checking the latest weather reports, reluctantly agreed, helping her set up a makeshift bed of hay bales and sleeping bags in the barn's feed room. Emma brought out extra blankets and a battery-powered lantern, muttering about crazy horse people, but smiling as she helped make Sarah comfortable. Throughout the night, as the storm raged outside, Sarah would wake periodically to check on Hope. The mare remained surprisingly calm despite the howling wind, drawing comfort from Sarah's presence, just as Sarah drew comfort from hers. During one of these midnight checks, Sarah sat in the hay beside Hope, listening to the storm and thinking about how far they'd come. "You know what, girl?" she whispered, stroking Hope's neck. "I think we were meant to find each other. Maybe we both needed someone to believe in us." The storm lasted 3 days, during which Sarah's dedication never wavered. She maintained Hope's care schedule despite the challenging conditions, often having to dig paths through deep snowdrifts to reach the barn. Her science teacher, Ms. Rodriguez had been so impressed by Sarah's commitment that she'd arranged for Sarah to earn extra credit by documenting the challenges and solutions of winter horse care. As winter deepened, Sarah's project documentation grew more detailed. She now had months of data showing Hope's progress, from the frightened, malnourished mare at the auction to the strong, confident horse she was becoming. The transformation was even more striking in the winter photographs. Hope's healthy coat, bright eyes, and confident stance a testament to the power of proper care and unwavering love. The district science fair was scheduled for early February, and Sarah worked tirelessly to prepare her presentation. Emma helped her create professional-looking display boards, while their father advised her on how to present the medical aspects of Hope's rehabilitation in a way that would be both accurate and accessible. But it was Katie, Mrs. Johnson's granddaughter, who came up with the idea that would make Sarah's presentation truly special. "What if," she suggested one afternoon while helping Sarah organize her documentation, "we made a video showing Hope's daily routine, like how you care for her in winter versus summer and all the special things you have to do." The idea took root, and soon Sarah was working with Emma to create a short documentary about Hope's rehabilitation. They filmed her daily care routine, training sessions with Dr. Anderson, and even included interviews with people who had witnessed Hope's transformation. Mr. Peterson spoke about the importance of giving animals second chances, his voice gruff with emotion as he described the change he'd seen in both horse and girl. Dr. Anderson provided professional insights into Hope's medical recovery, while Katie shared her perspective as someone who had learned about horses through watching Sarah and Hope's journey. As January drew to a close, Sarah faced an unexpected challenge. Victoria Blackwood from Mountain View Equestrian Center returned, this time with a film crew in tow. "We're doing a special segment on local interest stories," she explained smoothly to Sarah's father. "A piece about your daughter and Hope would be perfect, inspiring young riders, promoting animal welfare, that sort of thing." Sarah was initially hesitant, remembering their previous encounter, but Dr. Anderson encouraged her to consider it. "Think about how many other people might be inspired to help animals in need if they hear your story," she suggested. After careful consideration and family discussion, Sarah agreed to the interview, but with conditions. The filming would be done at Mr. Peterson's property, not at Mountain View, and Hope's care routine wouldn't be disrupted for the sake of getting better shots. The day of filming was both exciting and nerve-wracking. Sarah went about her normal routine with Hope, trying to ignore the cameras following her every move. She spoke from her heart about Hope's journey, about the challenges they'd faced, and the bond they'd formed. The most powerful moment came when Sarah demonstrated the trust exercises she and Hope had developed. Without any verbal commands, Hope would now follow Sarah's subtle body language, moving in perfect harmony with her young handler. When Sarah stopped, Hope stopped. When Sarah turned, Hope turned. It was like watching a dance between two beings who could read each other's thoughts. Victoria Blackwood was visibly impressed. "This is remarkable," she admitted, watching Sarah and Hope work together. "I've seen professional trainers who haven't achieved this level of connection with their horses." The filming concluded with Sarah riding Hope in a simple pattern around the corral. The mare's movements were smooth and confident, her trust in Sarah evident in every step. The sight of the small girl and the once broken horse moving as one brought tears to more than a few eyes among the film crew. That evening, after the film crew had packed up and left, Sarah spent extra time with Hope, brushing her coat until it gleamed in the winter sunset. "You were perfect today, girl," she whispered, pressing her face against Hope's warm neck. "You showed them all what you can do." The experience had given Sarah a new perspective on their journey. It wasn't just about saving one horse anymore. It was about showing others what was possible when you refused to give up on someone, about inspiring people to look past appearances and see the potential that lay beneath. As she made her final notes for the day in her project journal, Sarah added a special entry. "Today, Hope taught me something new. She showed me that sometimes the best way to help others is to share your story, to let them see what love and patience can accomplish. Maybe that's why we found each other, not just to help each other heal, but to show others that healing is possible, no matter how broken someone might seem." The winter air was crisp and clear as Sarah walked back to the house, Hope's soft, Nika following her across the snow-covered ground. Above her, the Montana sky was filling with stars, each one a reminder of the dreams that had brought her to that auction months ago, dreams that were now becoming reality in ways she never could have imagined. Inside, her father was waiting with hot chocolate and a proud smile. "You know," he said as Sarah shed her winter gear, "your mother always said that the greatest gifts often come disguised as challenges. I think she would say you and Hope are proof of that." Sarah nodded, warming her hands around the mug. "I think everything that happened, even the hard parts, helped us get where we are now. Hope needed someone to believe in her, and I needed something to believe in after Mom." She trailed off, then smiled. "I guess sometimes the best things in life find you when you're not even looking for them." As she fell asleep that night, Sarah could hear Hope moving around in her barn, the familiar sounds bringing comfort in the winter darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth and learning, but together they would face whatever came their way. The girl who dared to dream, and the horse who taught her that sometimes the biggest dreams come true in the most unexpected ways. The February morning of the district science fair dawned bright and cold, the Montana sun casting long shadows across the fresh snow. Sarah had barely slept the night before, going over her presentation again and again in her mind. The living room of their modest home had been transformed into a staging area, with her carefully crafted display boards propped against the walls and her project documentation spread across every available surface. Emma found her sister already, dressed and double-checking her materials at 5 in the morning. "You know the fair doesn't start until 9, right?" she asked, stifling a yawn. "I know," Sarah replied, adjusting the position of a photo showing Hope's progress, "but I want everything to be perfect. This isn't just about winning a science fair anymore, Emma. It's about showing people what's possible when you believe in someone." The display Sarah had created was impressive. The center panel featured a timeline of Hope's rehabilitation, complete with photographs documenting every stage of her recovery. The left panel detailed the medical aspects of her care, including Dr. Anderson's treatment plans and the careful monitoring of Hope's vital signs and weight gain. The right panel showcased the behavioral changes and training progress, illustrated with charts and graphs that Emma had helped create. But the crowning piece was the video they had produced, showing Hope's journey from the frightened, emaciated mare at the auction to the confident, healthy horse she had become. Sarah had worked with Emma for weeks to edit the footage, making sure it captured not just the physical transformation, but the growing bond between horse and handler. David Matthews watched his daughters making final adjustments to the display, feeling a familiar ache in his chest as he recognized his late wife's determination in Sarah's focused expression. "Your mother would have loved this," he said softly, helping them load the boards into their truck. "She always said that the best science tells a story that touches hearts as well as minds." The drive to the Gallatin County High School, where the district science fair was being held, seemed to take forever. Sarah clutched her project notebook in her lap, occasionally flipping through its pages to review her notes. The notebook had become a detailed chronicle of Hope's rehabilitation, filled with daily observations, medical data, and personal reflections that showed the depth of Sarah's commitment to her horse's recovery. When they arrived at the school, they found the gymnasium already buzzing with activity. Students from across the district were setting up their projects, their displays covering topics ranging from renewable energy to ecosystem conservation. Sarah's father and Emma helped her carry her materials to her assigned space, carefully setting up the display boards and positioning her laptop for the video presentation. As they worked, Sarah noticed other students and judges pausing to look at her photographs of Hope. The contrast between the before and after images was striking, drawing people in to learn more about the story behind them. Even some of the other contestants stopped to ask questions, genuinely interested in Hope's journey. Dr. Anderson arrived just as they were finishing the setup, wearing a professional blazer over her usual practical clothing. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," she said, giving Sarah an encouraging smile. "You've done something remarkable, both with Hope's rehabilitation and with documenting the process so thoroughly." The science fair judges began their rounds. At precisely 9:30, Sarah stood tall beside her display, her nervousness forgotten, as she launched into the presentation she had practiced so many times. She explained the scientific principles behind Hope's rehabilitation program, discussing the careful balance of nutrition, exercise, and medical treatment that had contributed to her recovery. "The key finding of my research," Sarah explained to the attentive judges, "is that physical rehabilitation in horses is inseparable from emotional rehabilitation." Hope's recovery accelerated significantly once she began to trust her caregivers and feel secure in her new environment. This suggests that the psychological aspects of rehabilitation are just as important as the physical protocols. One of the judges, a professor from Montana State University, seemed particularly interested in Sarah's documentation methods. "Your data collection is impressively thorough," he noted, examining her charts. "How did you develop your monitoring system?" Sarah explained how she had combined traditional veterinary monitoring techniques with her own daily observations, creating a comprehensive picture of Hope's progress. She showed them her notebook, pointing out how she had tracked everything, from Hope's vital signs to her behavioral changes, creating a detailed record of her recovery journey. When she played the video, a small crowd gathered around her display. The footage showed Hope's transformation from different angles: medical, behavioral, and emotional. There were clips of their training sessions with Dr. Anderson, demonstrations of Hope's growing trust and confidence, and interviews with community members who had witnessed their journey. The final scene showed Sarah and Hope moving together in the snow-covered corral, their connection evident in every synchronized movement. The mare's once dull coat now gleamed in the winter sun, her head held high with renewed confidence. The transformation was so dramatic that several observers gasped, unable to believe it was the same horse. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed a familiar face in the crowd: Victoria Blackwood from Mountain View Equestrian Center. Woman watched Sarah's presentation with an unreadable expression, taking notes on a small pad. Sarah felt a moment of anxiety, but pushed it aside, focusing instead on answering the questions of a group of elementary school students who were fascinated by Hope's story. During the lunch break, Victoria approached Sarah's display. "I owe you an apology," she said, surprising Sarah with her directness. "When I first saw Hope, I thought she was a lost cause. I couldn't understand why you refused our offer. But watching your presentation today, seeing the scientific rigor you've applied to her rehabilitation while maintaining such a strong emotional connection, well, I was wrong. You've achieved something quite extraordinary." Sarah accepted the apology with grace, remembering what her mother had taught her about the importance of allowing people to change their minds. "Would you like to come see Hope sometime?" she offered. "She's even stronger now than in the video." Victoria smiled, reaching into her bag. "Actually, I had something else in mind. The segment we filmed about you and Hope has generated a lot of interest. We've received numerous requests from other rehabilitation facilities wanting to learn more about your methods." She handed Sarah a business card. "We'd like to develop your documentation system into a formal protocol that could help other young riders work with rescue horses. With proper credit to you, of course." Sarah's eyes widened at the possibility. The idea that her work with Hope could help other horses and handlers was more exciting than any ribbon or trophy. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Hope's story shouldn't end with just us." The afternoon brought the final judging, and Sarah presented her findings one last time to the panel of judges. She spoke with confidence born from months of hands-on experience, her passion for the subject evident in every word. When asked about future implications of her research, Sarah outlined her hopes for developing better rehabilitation protocols for rescue horses, emphasizing the importance of combining physical care with emotional support. As the judges deliberated, Sarah's father pulled her aside. "No matter what happens with the awards," he said, hugging her tightly, "what you've accomplished goes far beyond any science fair project. You've shown that science and compassion can work hand in hand to create real change." The award ceremony began at 4 o'clock. Sarah sat between her father and Emma, trying to control her nervous energy as the various category winners were announced. When they reached the Life Sciences division, she held her breath, squeezing Emma's hand. First place in Life Sciences and recipient of the Special Innovation Award, the head judge announced, goes to Sarah Matthews for her project Hope's Journey, a scientific approach to equine rehabilitation. The applause was thunderous as Sarah made her way to the stage. But it wasn't the blue ribbon or the special award plaque that made her heart soar. It was knowing that Hope's story would now reach even more people, possibly inspiring others to give seemingly hopeless cases a second chance. As she accepted her awards, Sarah caught sight of Ms. Rodriguez in the audience, beaming with pride. The science teacher had been right. Hope's rehabilitation wasn't just a personal journey, it was a scientific endeavor that could contribute to the broader field of animal rehabilitation. After the ceremony, Sarah's display area was crowded with people wanting to learn more about her methods. Several veterinary students from the university asked detailed questions about her documentation system, while younger students were more interested in the emotional aspects of Hope's recovery. Sarah answered every question patiently, sharing both the triumphs and challenges of Hope's rehabilitation. She explained how each setback had taught them something valuable, and how the support of their community had made the seemingly impossible task achievable. As the day drew to a close and they began packing up the display, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The science fair had been more than just a competition. It had been an opportunity to share Hope's story in a way that could make a real difference in the world of equine rehabilitation. The drive home was filled with excited chatter about the day's events, but as they approached Mr. Peterson's property, Sarah grew quiet, looking eagerly for her first glimpse of Hope. The mare was waiting at the fence, as if she knew this had been an important day for both of them. Sarah jumped out of the truck as soon as they parked, running to greet her horse. Hope nickered softly, stretching her neck over the fence to touch her nose to Sarah's shoulder. In that moment, all the excitement of the science fair faded into the background. This was what really mattered, this connection that had transformed both their lives. Later that evening, as Sarah made her final notes in her project journal, she added a special entry. Today wasn't just about winning awards or proving scientific points. It was about showing the world that sometimes the most important scientific discoveries come from following your heart. Hope taught me that healing isn't just about medicine and measurements. It's about belief, patience, and love. And maybe that's the greatest scientific breakthrough of all. As she closed her notebook, Sarah could hear Hope moving around in her barn. The familiar sounds, a reminder of how far they'd come from that day at the auction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but together they would face whatever came their way. The girl who dared to believe in science and magic, and the horse who proved that sometimes the two are one and the same. The sun set over Paradise Valley, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of pink and gold. Sarah stood at the corral fence, watching Hope grazing peacefully in the last light of day. The mare's winter coat gleamed with health, her movements strong and confident, a far cry from the trembling creature she had been less than a year ago. Dr. Anderson's words from their first meeting echoed in Sarah's mind. Sometimes the greatest victories come from simply refusing to give up. Looking at Hope now, Sarah knew those words had been prophetic. Their journey together had been about more than just physical rehabilitation. It had been about proving that with enough love, patience, and scientific understanding, even the most damaged spirits could heal. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah made her way back to the house, her science fair ribbons clutched in one hand, her project notebook in the other. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to learn and grow. But for now, she was content knowing that she and Hope had not only achieved their goals, but had created a legacy that might help other horses and handlers find their way to healing. The kitchen lights cast a warm glow through the windows, and Sarah could see her father and Emma waiting inside. This, too, was part of Hope's gift, the way she had brought their family closer together, helping them heal from their own losses, even as they helped her heal from hers. Sarah took one last look at the starlit corral before heading inside. Hope lifted her head, nickering softly in the darkness, and Sarah smiled. Some people might call it science, others might call it love, but Sarah knew the truth. Sometimes the greatest miracles happen when both come together in perfect harmony. Spring arrived in Paradise Valley with a burst of color and promise, bringing with it new opportunities and challenges for Sarah and Hope. The success at the district science fair had opened doors neither of them could have imagined just a few months earlier. News of Sarah's innovative approach to equine rehabilitation had spread throughout the Montana horse community, drawing attention from unexpected quarters. One warm March morning, as Sarah was going through her daily routine with Hope, a sleek horse trailer pulled up to Mr. Peterson's property. Dr. Anderson stepped out, followed by a man Sarah didn't recognize, who carried himself with the confident air of someone who had spent his life around horses. "Sarah," Dr. Anderson called out, "I'd like you to meet someone. This is James McConnell from the Montana Horse Sanctuary. He's been very interested in your work with Hope." Sarah had heard of the sanctuary. It was one of the largest equine rescue operations in the state, known for taking in some of the most challenging cases of abuse and neglect. James McConnell studied Hope with an expert's eye as Sarah led her through their morning exercises. "Remarkable," he murmured, watching the fluid communication between girl and horse. "Dr. Anderson told me about your success, but seeing it in person is something else entirely. Would you mind showing me your documentation system?" Sarah retrieved her project notebook, now supplemented with additional observations and data from the months following the science fair. As she explained her methods, James nodded thoughtfully, occasionally making notes of his own. "We take in dozens of rescue cases every year," he explained, "but our success rate with severe cases hasn't been as high as we'd like. Your approach, combining scientific monitoring with emotional rehabilitation, it's exactly what we've been missing." He turned to face Sarah directly, his expression serious. "We'd like to implement your protocol at the sanctuary. More than that, we'd like you to help us develop a training program for our volunteers. Your experience with Hope could help us save many more horses." Sarah's heart raced at the possibility. "You mean, you want to use my methods to help other horses?" "Exactly," James smiled. "We're organizing a summer workshop for rescue handlers. Would you and Hope be willing to be part of it? Your story could inspire others, and your practical experience would be invaluable." The opportunity was exciting but daunting. Sarah looked at Hope, who was watching the conversation with pricked ears, as if she understood the importance of the moment. "We'd need to talk about it with my dad," she said carefully, "but I'd love to help if we can." That evening over dinner, Sarah's father listened thoughtfully to the proposal. "It's a wonderful opportunity," he agreed, "but it would be a big commitment. The sanctuary is an hour's drive away, and you'd need to prepare proper presentations." "I could help with the presentations," Emma offered, surprising everyone. "I mean, I already helped with the science fair stuff, and I've learned a lot about horses from watching you work with Hope." The family discussion continued late into the evening, weighing the challenges against the potential benefits. Finally, they agreed that Sarah could participate in the workshop program with certain conditions. She would need to maintain her grades at school, and the workshop sessions would be limited to weekends to avoid interfering with Hope's regular care routine. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah worked with Emma to adapt her science fair presentation into a format suitable for teaching others. Dr. Anderson helped her develop practical demonstrations that would show rescue handlers how to implement her monitoring systems. Hope seemed to sense the importance of their new mission. The mare's confidence had grown tremendously since their science fair triumph, and she now approached new challenges with calm assurance. Sarah had started introducing her to different objects and situations, preparing her to remain calm in the workshop environment. The first workshop was scheduled for a Saturday in early April. Sarah barely slept the night before, nervous about presenting to experienced horse handlers. But when she arrived at the sanctuary with Hope, her anxiety began to fade. The other participants, a mix of volunteers and staff members, welcomed them with genuine interest and respect. James had set up a small arena for the demonstrations, with chairs arranged around the perimeter for the workshop participants. Sarah began by sharing Hope's story, her voice growing stronger as she described their journey from that first day. At the auction, the most important thing I learned, she told the attentive audience, is that physical healing and emotional healing have to happen together. You can provide all the right medical care, but if you don't help the horse learn to trust again, you're only solving part of the problem. She demonstrated her documentation methods, showing how simple observations could build into a comprehensive picture of a horse's progress. The participants were particularly interested in her system for tracking behavioral changes alongside physical improvements. "It's like learning a new language," Sarah explained, leading Hope through a series of trust exercises. Every horse tells you what they need, but you have to learn how to listen. The practical portion of the workshop proved especially powerful. Sarah worked with a recently rescued mare, showing how to apply her methods from the very beginning. The horse, initially nervous and defensive, began to respond to Sarah's gentle approach, demonstrating in real time the effectiveness of her techniques. "Notice how she's reading the horse's body language," James pointed out to the group. "She's not just following a set protocol, she's adapting her approach based on the horse's responses." During the lunch break, several participants shared their own rescue stories with Sarah, seeking her advice on specific challenges they faced. She was surprised to find that despite her youth, her experience with Hope had given her insights that could help even seasoned handlers. One elderly volunteer, wiping tears from her eyes, hugged Sarah impulsively. "We've been doing this work for years," she said, "but sometimes we get so focused on the physical rehabilitation that we forget about the emotional healing. You've reminded us what this work is really about." The success of the first workshop led to regular monthly sessions. Each time, Sarah and Hope would demonstrate different aspects of their rehabilitation journey, from basic trust-building exercises to more advanced training techniques. The sanctuary began implementing Sarah's documentation system with all their new rescues, and the results were promising. Word of the workshops spread through the rescue community. Soon, handlers from neighboring states were traveling to Montana to learn from the girl who had transformed a broken-down auction horse into a symbol of hope and healing. But perhaps the most meaningful impact came closer to home. One Sunday afternoon, as Sarah was cleaning Hope's stall, she heard the sound of vehicles pulling up to the corral. Looking out, she saw several trucks and horse trailers, and a small crowd of people gathering near the fence. Mr. Peterson came walking over, looking somewhat sheepish. "Hope you don't mind," he said, "but some folks from town heard about your work at the sanctuary. They've got some rescue horses of their own, and they were hoping you might be willing to share some advice." Sarah looked at the group more carefully and recognized several faces, local ranchers and horse owners who had once been skeptical of her efforts with Hope. Now they were here, seeking her help with their own rescue cases. One by one, they shared their stories, horses they had taken in but struggled to rehabilitate, cases that seemed resistant to traditional methods. Sarah listened carefully, then began to demonstrate with Hope how her approach might help. "The key," she explained, showing them how to use her documentation system, "is to celebrate the small victories. Every tiny improvement is a step forward, and when you record them all, you start to see patterns that can help you understand what's working and what isn't." As the afternoon progressed, Sarah found herself drawing on everything she had learned. From Hope, Dr. Anderson, and their experiences at the sanctuary, She showed them how to read subtle changes in a horse's behavior, how to build trust through consistency and patience, and how to maintain detailed records of their progress. The impact of their work continued to ripple outward. Victoria Blackwood, true to her word, had helped develop Sarah's methods into a formal protocol that was now being shared with riding centres across the country. The video from the science fair had gone viral in the equestrian community, inspiring other young riders to take on rehabilitation cases. But success brought its own challenges. As summer approached, Sarah found herself struggling to balance the growing demands for her expertise with Hope's regular care routine and her own schoolwork. Some days, it seemed like everyone wanted a piece of their story, forgetting that at its heart, it was still about a girl and her horse. One evening, after a particularly busy day of demonstrations and consultations, Sarah sat in the corral with Hope, letting the peace of the moment wash over her. The mare stood nearby, occasionally lowering her head to nuzzle Sarah's hair as if sensing her need for quiet companionship. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing too much," Sarah confessed softly to her horse. "But then I think about all the other horses out there who need help, and I remember how it felt when everyone thought you were hopeless. We have to help them, don't we?" Hope's gentle nickering seemed like an answer, and Sarah smiled, reaching up to stroke the mare's soft nose. They had come so far from that day at the auction, grown so much together, and now they had the chance to help others do the same. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. Sarah could hear the distant sounds of evening settling over Paradise Valley, the calling of birds, the rustle of wind through the grass, the peaceful sounds of horses in nearby pastures. Her father's voice carried across the corral. "Sarah, dinner's ready, sweetheart." "Coming, Dad," she called back, giving Hope one final pat before standing up. As she walked toward the house, she heard Hope's soft whinny behind her and turned to wave. The mare stood outlined against the sunset, her once broken body now strong and proud, her spirit shining through in every movement. She was more than just a success story now. She was a beacon of hope for other rescued horses, a living testament to the power of love, science, and unwavering faith. Sarah smiled, thinking of all the lives they had touched already and all those they had yet to reach. Their journey had started with a simple act of belief, a young girl seeing potential, where others saw only problems. Now that belief had grown into something bigger than either of them, spreading ripples of hope and healing across the horse world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new horses to help, new handlers to teach. But tonight, Sarah was content, knowing that she and Hope had found their true purpose, not just in healing each other, but in showing others the way forward from darkness to light. As she reached the porch, Sarah paused for one last look at Hope, silhouetted against the darkening sky. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the smallest acts of courage, like a 9-year-old girl raising her hand at an auction, believing in a horse that no one else wanted. The screen door creaked open behind her, and Emma's voice called out, "Are you coming in or what? Dad made your favorite, mac and cheese with the crispy top." Sarah laughed, turning toward the warm light spilling from the kitchen. "Yeah, I'm coming, just saying good night to Hope." As she stepped inside to join her family, Sarah carried with her the quiet certainty that while their story might have started as a simple tale of rescue and rehabilitation, it had grown into something far more powerful, a reminder that sometimes the most important scientific discoveries come wrapped in fur and hope, teaching us lessons that go far beyond any textbook or theory. The evening settled over Paradise Valley, stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. In her barn, Hope moved quietly in her stall, at peace in the home she had found with the girl who had seen her true worth. Together, they had not only rewritten their own story, but had begun to change the stories of countless others. One heart, one horse, one hope at a time. 1 year to the day after Sarah first raised her hand at the auction, Paradise Valley awoke to a perfect Montana morning. The summer sun painted the mountains in shades of gold, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of wildflowers across Mr. Peterson's property. Sarah stood at Hope's stall, taking in the moment and marveling at how much had changed in just 12 months. The broken, frightened mare from the auction was now a stunning example of what love and dedication could achieve. Hope's chestnut coat gleamed with health, her eyes bright with intelligence and trust. She had filled out beautifully, muscle replacing the stark outline of bones that had once defined her frame, but the physical transformation, remarkable as it was, told only part of their story. "Ready for our big day, girl?" Sarah asked softly, running a brush over Hope's sleek coat. The mare nickered in response, turning her head to nuzzle Sarah's shoulder. Their morning grooming session had become a cherished ritual, a quiet time, for just the two of them before the day's activities began. Today was special. They were hosting their first full-scale rehabilitation workshop at home. Mr. Peterson had generously offered the use of his entire property, including the newly restored riding arena. Horse trailers had already begun arriving, carrying rescue horses and their handlers from across 3 states. The Montana Horse Sanctuary had helped organize the event, turning it into a comprehensive training program for rescue facilities. Dr. Anderson would be leading the veterinary sessions, while Sarah and Hope would demonstrate the practical application of their rehabilitation methods. As Sarah finished grooming Hope, she heard familiar voices approaching. Emma and their father were helping set up the registration area, and she could hear Mr. Peterson directing vehicles to the parking area he had prepared. The whole community had come together to support this event, turning it into something far bigger than Sarah had ever imagined. "There's my girls," David Matthews said, entering the barn with a proud smile. He was wearing a new shirt with Hope's Legacy Rehabilitation Program embroidered on the pocket, a surprise gift from Emma for the occasion. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Sarah took a deep breath, checking Hope's tack one final time. "A little nervous," she admitted, "but excited too. It feels right, doesn't it? Sharing everything we've learned, helping other horses get the same chance Hope had?" Her father nodded, reaching out to squeeze her shoulder. "Your mother would be so proud of what you've accomplished, not just with Hope, but with everything that's grown from it. You've created something truly special here." The workshop participants began gathering in the arena, a diverse group ranging from experienced rescue handlers to families looking to take in their first rehabilitation case. Sarah recognized some faces from previous sessions at the sanctuary, but many were new, drawn by the growing reputation of their program. James McConnell from the sanctuary stepped forward to open the session. "A year ago," he began, "a young girl saw something in a broken-down mare that everyone else had missed. Today, that girl and that horse are teaching us all how to be better handlers, better caregivers, and better advocates for the animals who need us most. Please welcome Sarah Matthews and Hope." As Sarah led Hope into the arena, a hush fell over the crowd. The mare moved with fluid grace, her head held high, every step showing the confidence she had gained. They demonstrated their trust exercises, showing how simple groundwork could build powerful connections between horse and handler. "The most important thing I've learned," Sarah explained to the attentive audience, "is that every horse has their own timeline for healing. Hope taught me that patience isn't just waiting for something to happen, it's actively believing in the possibility of change, even when progress seems slow." Throughout the morning, Sarah and Hope worked with different rescue horses, demonstrating how to adapt their methods to various cases. Each success, no matter how small, was celebrated, reinforcing the importance of acknowledging every step forward. During the lunch break, Victoria Blackwood approached Sarah with an unexpected proposal. "The video from your science fair has gone viral in the international equestrian community," she explained. "We've received inquiries from rehabilitation centers as far away as Europe and Australia. They want to learn more about your methods." Sarah's eyes widened at the thought of their work reaching so far. "But how would that even work? We can't travel around the world." Victoria smiled. "That's why I'm here. Mountain View is prepared to help you develop an online training program. We could film detailed instructional videos, create comprehensive manuals, maybe even do virtual consulting sessions. Your work could help horses and handlers worldwide." The possibility was both exciting and overwhelming. Sarah looked to Hope, who stood calmly beside her, a living testament to the power of their methods. "I'd need to think about it," she said carefully. "Talk it over with my family and make sure it's right for us." The afternoon session focused on the scientific aspects of rehabilitation. Dr. Anderson led a detailed discussion of Sarah's documentation system, showing how systematic observation and record-keeping could improve outcomes for rescue horses. "What Sarah and Hope have created," Dr. Anderson explained, "is more than just a rehabilitation program. It's a new way of thinking about horse rescue, one that combines scientific rigor with emotional intelligence. The results speak for themselves." As if to emphasize this point, Hope demonstrated some of their more advanced work, moving through complex patterns with fluid grace. The mare who had once struggled to walk now floated across the arena, responding to Sarah's subtle cues with perfect understanding. Katie, who had been helping with the younger participants, led a session on youth involvement in rescue work. "Sarah showed us that age doesn't matter when it comes to making a difference," she told her eager audience. "What matters is dedication, patience, and the willingness to learn." As the day progressed, Sarah found herself moved by the stories participants shared, tales of horses they had saved, challenges they had overcome, and hopes for the future. Each story reinforced the importance of the work they were doing, the need for better rehabilitation methods in the rescue community. Late in the afternoon, Mr. Peterson surprised everyone by announcing a special presentation. He had compiled a video chronicling Sarah and Hope's journey, including footage from their early days that Sarah hadn't even known existed. The assembled crowd watched in amazement as Hope's transformation unfolded on the screen. "This is why we're all here," Mr. Peterson said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Not just to learn techniques or follow protocols, but to remember that every animal deserves a chance, and every act of kindness can create ripples we never imagined." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the arena, Sarah led the participants in one final exercise. Each handler worked with their horse, practicing the trust-building techniques they had learned throughout the day. The arena was filled with quiet murmurs of encouragement and the occasional soft nicker of a horse responding to gentle guidance. Standing at the center of it all, Sarah felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what Hope's story had been, leading to all along, not just their personal journey of healing, but the chance to help others find their own paths to recovery and trust. After the last trailer had pulled away and the property had grown quiet, Sarah sat with Hope in their favorite spot by the corral fence. The mare stood contentedly beside her, occasionally lowering her head to graze on the sweet summer grass. Emma joined them, carrying 3 cups of hot chocolate. "Dad said Mom always believed hot chocolate made everything better," she said, handing one to Sarah and setting another on the fence post for when their father joined them. "I think she would have loved seeing all of this." Sarah nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Sometimes I wonder if she somehow knew, if she guided me to that auction that day, helped me see what everyone else was missing in Hope." "She always could see the potential in things," their father said, walking up to join them. "Just like you do, Sarah. That's her gift in you." As they sat together in the gathering dusk, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. From that first desperate bid at the auction to today's successful workshop, every step had taught her something valuable about love, healing, and the power of unwavering faith. Hope had shown her that sometimes the biggest dreams come in the most unexpected packages, and that true healing was about more than just physical recovery. Their story had touched lives far beyond Paradise Valley, creating a legacy of hope that would continue to grow and spread. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and a cool evening breeze rustled through the grass. Hope shifted closer to Sarah, offering the warm comfort of her presence. In that moment, Sarah felt a deep sense of completion, not an ending, but a beautiful beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new horses to help, new handlers to teach. The online training program would need careful consideration, and there were already requests for more workshops. But for now, Sarah was content to sit with her family and her horse, grateful for the journey that had brought them here. As if reading her thoughts, Hope lifted her head and nickered softly into the evening air. Sarah smiled, reaching up to stroke the mare's soft nose. "Yeah, girl," she whispered, "we did it, and we're just getting started." The Montana night settled around them, peaceful and full of promise. In the distance, a coyote called, and somewhere in the darkness, another horse answered. Sarah leaned back against the fence, feeling the solid warmth of hope beside her, the presence of her family around her, and the endless possibilities that stretched out before them. Their story had begun with a simple act of belief. A young girl seeing hope where others saw only hopelessness. Now that belief had grown into something larger than themselves, touching lives and changing hearts far beyond the boundaries of Paradise Valley. As Sarah finally stood to head inside for the night, she paused for one last look at Hope. The mare's outline was silvered by starlight, her presence as strong and steady as the mountains that surrounded them. From broken auction horse to beloved partner and teacher, Hope had become more than just a success story. She was a living testament to the power of love, patience, and unwavering faith. "Good night, Hope," Sarah whispered, her voice carrying all the love and gratitude she felt for this remarkable horse who had changed her life. "Sweet dreams, girl." Hope nickered softly in response, her gentle sound carrying on the evening breeze. As Sarah walked toward the warm lights of home, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the greatest miracles start with the smallest acts of courage. Like a 9-year-old girl raising her hand at an auction, believing in a horse that no one else wanted, The screen door creaked open as Sarah stepped onto the porch, the familiar sound a reminder of all the ordinary moments that had led to this extraordinary journey. Inside, her family waited with love and understanding, ready to help her face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. Sarah paused in the doorway, looking back one last time at the starlit silhouette of hope in her paddock. The mare lifted, her head, ears pricked forward as if to say good night. In that moment, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, filled with endless possibilities and countless more lives to touch. As she stepped inside to join her family, the warm light spilling from the kitchen seemed to illuminate more than just the room. It lit up all the dreams and possibilities that lay ahead. Their journey had started with hope, grown through love and dedication, and now promised to continue touching lives for years to come. The night settled over Paradise Valley, wrapping the world in peaceful darkness. In her paddock, Hope moved quietly, content in the home she had found with the girl who had seen her true worth. Together, they had not only rewritten their own story, but had begun to change the stories of countless others. One heart, one horse, one hope at a time. And somewhere in the vast Montana sky, perhaps Sarah's mother was watching, smiling down on the daughter who had learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, who had turned a simple act of kindness into a legacy of healing and hope that would continue to grow and flourish for years to come. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.